What do you need before you promote your book? This episode, the essential pieces of a press kit, and what each part of that means to the future of your brand.
As the author, if you provide these assets to a media person, you are in a sense able to control the direction an interview takes. You're able to better control your brand and make sure that your brand stays consistent throughout every interview because you're sort of hand-picking the information that you're already giving the media people ahead of time.
I'm Chris Well, and this is DIY Author. You're an author. Maybe you're taking the traditional route. Maybe you've chosen an independent path. Or maybe you want the best of both worlds. Wherever you want to go as a writer, DIY Author is here to help you on your journey with advice, encouragement, and practical tips. Because do it yourself doesn't have to mean do it alone. Welcome to DIY Author. I'm your host, Chris Well. This episode features the second half of my conversation with former magazine editor Lindsay Williams. In fact, Lindsay and I are both former magazine editors, and for DIY Author, we create custom media kits for authors just like you. In this episode, we break down 6 of the most important components of a press kit and how each piece is used by members of the media. Before we get to that discussion, I want to make sure you know about your free download. We have a free checklist that outlines the 5 essentials that you need before you promote your book. To grab your free copy of that checklist, go online to DIYauthor.com/media and sign up for our free email newsletter. Learn what the media expects from a professional author website. Just go to DIYauthor.com/media and sign up for our newsletter and you'll get your free download. And now here's the rest of my conversation with Lindsay Williams. Now let's talk about the components of the DIY Author Media Kit. Whether you, listener, choose to make this kind of kit on your own, whether you choose to hire somebody else, or whether you choose to hire us, we believe that these are important pieces for your media kit, and that's why we built it this way. So, Lindsay, why don't we kind of go through the individual components and talk about, what they are, how they're used, and why they're important. We have 3 kinds of biographies here. We have a 1-sentence bio, a 50-word bio, and a 100-word bio. So let's start with the 1-sentence bio. In your experience in the media, how often was that kind of thing important to you?
Personally, I think for me, in dealing with a lot of music stuff in the music world, bios are a little different than in the book world because you're normally given a 2-page bio on an artist for an album, the same kinds of bios that I generally write, that labels hire me to write. But I think in the book world, you have a lot more instances where there are a lot of publications who may not do a full review of your product, but they are running the cover of your book, that cover image, and they're running sort of a short synopsis. And you might be on a page or on a website with, 10 other authors who have written 10 other books. But regardless, it's still a touch point for you. And I think that's definitely where the 1-sentence bios can come in handy. Now online, as far as product placement, a lot of these different online retailers are asking you to submit very short bios about who you are. And so I think that's where these shorter bios can really come in handy. Also, if you're guest blogging or you're doing any kind of writing for a print publication even, they often run shorter bios at the end of the pieces to kind of give the reader some context for who you are. And it's also a great place to plug your works. So it kind of gives credibility to who you are as a writer, and it lets the reader know instantly who you are and what you've written and sort of what your latest book is, so that they at least, if nothing else, get a small glimpse into who you are as an author and what your latest work is.
And I would say, too, that the shorter that the bio is, the more important that all of those words are focused on the right thing. Mm-hmm. Like a short, but 1-sentence bio
It's the kind of thing also that like any website that's doing kind of a data, and it's kind of what you were talking about, I guess. But like I built a website at a previous company where we were doing a database of authors,
Yeah.
of novelists. And so we needed a lot of very short biographies very quickly because we were, within a matter of weeks, we were building a project that had hundreds of authors. And the way that the website was designed, there was a photo of the author that was 100 by 100, and then there was a stripe that went next to the picture, and there was not a lot of room for verbiage. And you don't want the author bio to be about where you went to college, unless where you went to college has a very significant impact on why you wrote whatever your book is. So if you're a chef and your book is a cookbook and the college was a chef college, fine. But if you're writing thrillers, the fact that you got a PhD in something that's completely unrelated to your thrillers is not the thing that goes in this very short bio.
Right.
And then the bio, of course, social media. There's a lot of accounts where, Twitter or Facebook. I mean, you might do some of the longer ones. The 50-word one might work in some of these places, but there are places you're going to be filling out an account. You're going to be creating a profile. It's really going to be handy to be able to plug in that one sentence that is, and it's pared down to, this is who you are, and this is what sets you apart from other authors.
Absolutely. Well, and you have to realize, too, that 50 words, 100 words, if you think about it, a tweet is 140 characters. I mean, it's really short. It's really, really short and doesn't give you a lot of room. So like you said, you have to make every word count.
Right. And so the 50-word bio then is the second tier that we have, and that ends up being what, 2 to 3 sentences is what it works out to, right? Mm-hmm. And so I guess it's many of the same kinds of places we're talking about. It's just those places where you have you have room for 2 or 3 sentences.
Right.
So, and this, definitely if you have the room, your Facebook account, your Twitter account, your Pinterest account, this could be the bio that goes at the bottom if you do a guest blog. It's going to be either the 1 sentence or the 50-word bio probably. If you're this is the description that would be in your like a book jacket.
Right.
And then I would say also any media that is and I think the thing we haven't mentioned and is I think it's important to bring up is that many people in the media are on a deadline of some kind. And so the reason that an author needs these things to be ready before the media hears about them is so that it can be on their website, it can be available, and then when somebody suddenly has, now granted in the digital age, it doesn't happen as often where it's like, oh, I've got 2 inches to fill, like it was when I was working in newspapers where it's like, oh, I've got room for a tiny thing.
Right.
I've got to find something. It's 11 o'clock at night. I don't have time to contact somebody and hope that they get back to me. I need something that is ready to go right now. And so all of the pieces in this kit are things that they're ready to go right now, and a person in the media can grab whichever of these 6 things fits what they're looking for. They can grab it, they can plug it in, and you as the author, you're going to probably hear about this after the fact.
Right. Right. Well, and the reality is that if there's someone at a media company who has been hired to or tasked with the project to build a large database of authors on their website, which there are a million websites out there who have databases of authors, then, if they can't easily find a short bio like the ones we're describing, they're going to write one themselves. And so why not already supply them with something that matches your brand and communicates exactly what you want to communicate?
Exactly. Now, let's see. The 100-word bio is the third tier, and I'm drawing a blank. I'm trying to visualize what that is.
I mean, it's
twice the length of the 50-word bio is what I'm guessing. 100 words.
Yeah.
I know a little.
It's a little longer, but it's still not. I mean, I'm thinking 3 or 4 really short sentences, if that. I mean,
Right.
it's still pretty concise. And again, I think you're going to use it in some of the same instances as you would the other bios. It's just where you have a little bit more room.
In a sense, the three types of short bios, it really comes down to the media person is going to have a specific hole
Right.
that they are trying to put that information in, and they're going to cut from the bottom. That's the thing. If they've gone to media school, then they've been taught to cut from the bottom.
Right.
So so what really is happening is that your one sentence, your 50 words, and your 100 words, you start with the super focused, this is the brand of the author, and then as you have a little more breathing room, you're able to bring in a little more personality, so that the 100-word bio, that is the one where if you really want to tell people the college you went to, maybe you can work that in.
Right.
If you really want to tell people you have a dog, that might be where you work it in. But it's sort of like it comes at the end
Sure.
after you've made sure that you have worked in all of the things that have to do with this is your brand, this is the kind of book that you do, this is the parts of your experience that are salient to the kind of book that you do.
Absolutely. I think they definitely build off of one another, and that first sentence is key because that's the hook and that's the sentence that's most likely to stay.
And then the next piece of the kit, and we are calling it an interview article, but it actually is what you mentioned earlier. It's the 2-page. It is a bio.
Right.
It is a 2-page bio. But the reason that I wanted to say interview article is that because I think in book world, I don't, like you and I, with our experience in the music industry, it's very normal to get a 2-page bio, and it's written like an article.
Right.
And so it's not the super focused thing. It is shaped in such a way that, yes, there is a news hook to this bio, to this article, but it also is more like there are quotes in it. It's got kind of the give and take and the ebb and flow of an article. And the intention is that the media person can just run this and it works as an article.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming from being an editor, the best thing in the world is to get a great piece of content that's ready to run. And, it saves time. The editors aren't having to hire someone else to write it. They're not having to do the legwork of getting an interview. And so actually this type of article is pretty rare, but I think it's an interesting and very necessary piece of the press kit, because even if people don't run it, I think it gives the media person who is about to interview you more background and context on your book and on you. And I think out of that feature article, then they can frame some intelligent questions to ask you, which is always important, because if the more you can prepare the person who's interviewing you, the better the interview will go.
And we can kind of, as these various pieces kind of get longer, I find myself thinking of almost like, here's another analogy coming. It's a hill. It's like a steep hill, we're getting up to the steeper part of the hill, which means that you creating this helps the person in the media get up that steep hill.
Right.
And if you don't have this, you are asking them to do that much more work. And some of them are going to say, I don't have to do this. I have somebody else that did create a bio. I had somebody else who did create an article. I don't need you because somebody else can fill that space.
Right. Yeah, and the reality is that people in the media, they don't have a lot of time to prep for interviews. I mean, I never have as much time as I would like to. And so instead, I could Google all day long, but instead of making it hard to find information about whoever the subject is that I'm interviewing, if I have things that are sent to me by the publicist, like this interview article that I can read in 5 minutes and then form some questions out of that, you have no idea how grateful these media people are and how much time it saves to just sort of have all this compact information at your fingertips so that you're not floundering around before an interview. And in reality, I think as the author, if you provide these assets to a media person, you are in a sense able to control the direction an interview takes. You're able to better control your brand and make sure that your brand stays consistent throughout every interview, because you're sort of hand-picking the information that you're already giving the media people ahead of time.
Yeah, the more that you help the media and give them useful and interesting information, the less likely they're going to fall back on the same questions they just asked the last person.
Absolutely, yeah. And it makes it more interesting for everyone involved.
And then the next piece is actually very similar to the interview article. It's the Q&A article. Mm-hmm. In fact, the way that we're building these kits is we're taking a single interview and turning them into these 6 different pieces.
Right.
So the Q&A article is literally, these are the questions we asked, mm-hmm. and these are, and these are edited, they're polished, but these are the answers to those questions.
Right.
And so why don't you say because when you receive a kit from a really good publicist, you're going to have both of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is actually just sort of the interview in a different format. You know, it's your interview article in a straightforward Q&A format. You know, if a journalist has very little time to prepare, the Q&A is probably the first place they're going to go, because it's very concise and very straightforward, and it normally pulls out the most foundational questions for your interview. And I think it also a lot of times keeps a media person from asking questions that are ridiculous. You know, if you're asking where an author's from and you're getting that confused, or you're talking about what genre of fiction that they write in. I mean, just very basic things that you need to know as you're going into an interview. The Q&A takes care of that. And it's also another piece that a lot of outlets will run as is. You know, it's another piece of content that you can provide editors for their website. There are a lot of articles, even in print magazines, that run as straight Q&A interviews. And so it's just one more piece of content that you can offer up as sort of the finished, complete package that they can then run if they want to.
And I think coming back to the multiple points of entry idea, mm-hmm. Even though the interview article and the Q&A article are essentially the same interview, they're packaged differently enough that, you know, the article is a whole unit, but the Q&A article is modular. So there are going to be some outlets that are like, you know what, I'm just going to take these 3 questions, or I have a news column, I'm going to take 1 question.
Right.
And this is because there's lots of news columns, you know, and blogs out there where I just need a quote. That's all I need is a quote. And this makes it so much easier to go right to the quotes.
Right.
And you see that question and you grab that quote, and that may be the only thing in the kit that ends up on that blog, but that is you on another blog. That is you in another place. And that's going to happen. And then when you multiply that by all of the possible places that may see that and may have use for that.
Absolutely. That's a lot of touch points.
Some of the journalists that are going to read this Q&A article, they may not ask the same questions. They may see these answers and then build on them.
Yeah.
And so the question they'll ask is, you said this, based on what you said, how about this?
Right.
And they'll actually go in a different direction. So that's also part of what's happening is you're arming the journalist with the ability. Well, it's exactly what you said earlier. So I'm now being redundant. You're helping the journalist be more intelligent in the way they approach the interview.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then the last piece of the kit is a press release. Mm-hmm. How do you approach writing a press release?
Well, we talked about that a little bit on the front end too, and just how crucial a press release is. But basically, you know, a press release works in a pyramid style, you know, so you've got, you know, your first sentence, well, your headline really has to tell the reader what you want them to know. And press releases sort of get a bad rap because a lot of times they're boring. But even if they're boring, they still have a really significant use. And I think that first sentence, if not that first paragraph, has to sort of be the clincher of what you're wanting to communicate with the release. You know, because, like we were talking about earlier, media's inboxes are flooded with press releases among other emails about projects that they're working on. And so they're not going to read a full release 9 times out of 10. And so you have to communicate what you want them to know immediately up front. And the great thing about press releases is that websites will also, if they have a news section, they run press releases verbatim. It's really good to include links to your website and your social sites in press releases so that you also give those outlets who choose to post your releases online, that you also give them opportunities to post those links so that people can find out more information about you. And generally there's press releases are very formulaic. They kind of work in a pyramid style, and you have the headline, then you have your most important paragraph is going to be your first paragraph. Press releases are generally pretty short, and then no more than probably 2 to 3 paragraphs for really short ones, and then at the bottom you're going to have a boilerplate, which is essentially a mini bio, which actually that's where something like your 100-word bio can really come in handy. You can kind of use that as a boilerplate at the end of your press release, and then in general you're going to have some contact information at the bottom, which is important as well. So yeah, it's a really essential part of the media process, but it's a very informative part. It's not artsy, it's not flowery, it's very concise and to the point, and it's really a clear picture of something that's newsworthy. When a press release rolls in my inbox, I know that somebody is telling me something new, and hopefully it's newsworthy.
In a way, the bios and the press release are almost like bookends to the kit, in that the bios are about the who, and the press release is more about the what.
Yeah.
Even though they're sort of, they're joined in the middle, in that what's in the press release will turn up in some of the bio materials, and the bio materials will turn up in the press release. They're pointed in different directions.
Right. I think it's important to note too that when you send out a press release, you want to make sure that you do have something to say, because you don't want to get a reputation as sending out releases just for the sake of sending something out if you really don't have anything newsworthy to talk about, because then I think media people will ignore your releases altogether. So I think you have to make sure that every time you do send something out, that it's significant and that it points back to your product and that it is newsworthy.
And I actually I have 2 things. In the show notes, there'll be a link. We just recently did an article on DIY. Well, as of this recording, we recently did an article on DIYauthor.com about how to write press releases. So if you listening would like to see that article and you haven't already read it, I'll be sure to put a link to that in the show notes for this episode. But I also want to mention that as we're talking about these materials, and so you listening at home have decided, okay, I understand I need the kit. I understand why I need it. I'm gonna get one. And you've either hired somebody to make one or you've made your own. I beg you not to send large attachments to the media.
That's right.
Make sure that you have put your kit on your website, and that what you're doing is you're sending the editor or the media person links to these materials, whether it's a link to a page or links to specific pieces. And especially, we didn't get to talking about photos. We are not putting photos. We are not creating photos for the kits that we're doing, but it's also an important component for an author to have is good author photos. Especially, do not attach large image files to emails that you send.
Right. And Dropbox is also a great free place for you to store press kits and an easy way for you to send a link out.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. You could put all your assets in there and then just have one place where you send all of your media.
And then for those listening, they're like, well, why can't I send large attachments? We're in the age of fast downloads. If you're emailing somebody that is at a media company, that company is probably going to block any emails that have large files because they don't know where they're from. They don't know what it is.
and they're just going to block it, and the editor will never see that email. And then in other cases, you may end up choking the server. There have been cases where I've received an email, and I had a large number of emails I was waiting to download because, a person in the media gets lots of emails. And there was this giant email that was blocking it. And so I saw this giant number not going down of emails that were supposed to be downloading because it was waiting to download this enormous file that somebody had sent me. And I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it was a movie or something. I don't know. But it was a huge file. And then I've also, another example I can think of is there was an author that we were wanting to put him on the cover of our magazine. And instead of sending us links to his high-resolution photos on a website, he kept sending them to us. And somewhere in the process, either his email service or our email service was shrinking them. So the photos we were receiving were not large enough to put on the cover of a magazine. And we kept saying, we need a larger photo. And he's like, what are you talking about? It's a huge photo. And then eventually, after many emails back and forth, we figured out that, the thing he's sending is not the thing we are receiving. So.
Well, and I think too, if you're sending large files over email, it really shows people that, media people that that you don't know any better. And I think it's just probably a more professional way to interact with media is to make sure you're just sending a link and not attaching huge files.
Yeah, I guess you raise a good point. It's a faux pas. It's almost as if you showed up at somebody's home with carrying luggage, and so they're not going to concentrate on whatever your true purpose is. They're like, why are you carrying your luggage into my home?
Right. And I think too
that was another analogy.
Yeah,
I apologize.
That was good. That was really good. I think too another thing is that normally, I mean, if you're being interviewed by a freelancer, they don't work for the publication that has an art director. The art director needs the photos. The freelancer doesn't need the photos. So a lot of times you're sending someone something that they don't need, that's taking up space in their inbox or, space on their computer. For the most part, in my work, I don't deal with the photos. The editor and or the art director at the publication or at the online outlet at the website, they're the ones who are requesting those types of things. So it just makes it easier for everyone involved if you have one sort of place where you're curating all these assets, and then you have a link, and then people can kind of pick and choose what they need to use out of your press kit.
All right. It's been wonderful talking with you, Lindsay, and I appreciate your time today. And so folks, this has been Lindsay Williams, and thank you very much for being on the show, Lindsay.
Thank you, Chris. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Are you struggling to get more attention for your book? Do you wish members of the media would help spread the word? Do you want them to tell their audience about you or your book? Then you need a media kit on your website that makes the job of media professionals easier. DIY Authors Digital Media Kit Service for Authors will create a custom digital media kit just for you that includes 3 kinds of author bios, an interview article suitable for press use, a Q&A with the author, a press release, and an audio interview. These kits are custom made by media professionals. For more details or to download a sample media kit, just go to bit.com/DIYA-kit. Before you contact the press or bloggers or reviewers, make certain that you're ready for them with your own digital media kit. This has been DIY Author. Please visit us online at DIYauthor.com and be sure to sign up for our email newsletter. If you enjoyed this program, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. Until next time, keep writing. And remember, do it yourself doesn't have to mean do it alone.